In late June, Australia made an amendment to the Social Media Minimum Age Act that expanded its scope to block access to sites like YouTube for anybody in the country under the age of 16. This was in addition to bans already in place for more traditional social media sites like Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Reddit. From then, over the course of just 30 days, a wave of governments and tech platforms have started following the old penal colony's lead. Here in the UK, the government introduced new laws requiring robust age verification checks for residents wanting to access materials that would, make Jesus sad. The EU began trials of age check systems for social media, and in America, several states have started rolling out age verification requirements, all under the guise of limiting minors' access to harmful social media and smut. Now, if there's one thing we all know about tech companies, it's that they can lobby against pretty much anything they don't like. But on this particular issue, they're actually pushing for these regulations harder than the governments. Starting in about a week from when this video is posted, YouTube will be introducing an AI system to guesstimate your age based on your watch patterns and activity. So if it sees all the mindless slop you've been consuming and determines you're under 16, it's going to restrict access to certain videos, change your advertising selection, and limit comments and uploads. They'll be joining other platforms like Discord, Spotify, and Meta, which have already started rolling out similar systems behind the scenes. Now, of course, there is one simple fix to get around all of these new limitations. All you need to do is hand over your identification.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed a new law that will force Apple and Google to verify users' ages.
We want them to have real experiences with real people.
Verifying your age keeps a child safe.
It's about how dangerous social media is for our children.
The time to act is now. We must protect our children so that we can protect their future.
Protecting the children has always been an effective way to push through policies that the general public would otherwise be opposed to. Nobody in today's, political climate wants to be on record saying anything other than they support protecting children. Social media companies are also largely unpopular with the general public, so for lawmakers, it's a slam dunk case that's very hard to oppose. A recent survey conducted by Pew Research found that most adults overwhelmingly support more control on how children engage with these platforms. But popular messages like this have always been used to push through otherwise unpopular changes like banning books, mandating security backends on devices, prohibitions, and censorship. Now, I know that's probably not a shock to you, but what may be surprising is why big tech companies are so willing to go along with these new changes, because there are genuine business liabilities that come with these rules. At the very same time that these new laws were being rolled out across the world, one of the most severe data breaches ever was taking place. The app T was intended to be used exclusively by women, so for verification, the company required new users to confirm their gender with a picture and their government-issued ID. Instead of being deleted after this verification, like the app claimed it would be, these files were kept unsecured on an open URL, resulting in tens of thousands of users having their most sensitive data leaked. Now, the original intention of this app and its strict identity verification was either for women's safety or doxing men, depending on who you ask. The whole fallout has become incredibly political, which is probably the only reason you've actually heard about it. Similar breaches are becoming more and more common all the time. Allianz Life Insurance lost the data of 1.4 million of their customers, and companies like Google, Apple, and Telegram lost 16 billion login details. Now, these would be bad enough as once-in-a-decade hacks, but all of these happened within just the last 30 days. The point is, every website that's holding onto your personal details is a big risk for you and a big risk for them. So for businesses to be embracing this so wholeheartedly, there needs to be some upside. Now, you might just think that if they get your ID, that's simply more data they can use to optimize content recommendations and advertising towards you, but it's not quite that simple. If you use their services frequently enough, even average tech companies can find out more about you than anything they're going to get off your driver's license or passport. The reason why suggestions served to you through platforms such as Google AdSense, Amazon, or Meta Ads seem so targeted is because even without logging into a dedicated profile, they can track thousands of variables to build up a pretty good idea of who you are and what you're into. They don't need your ID to sell ads to you. The real motivation is that companies like Amazon, Google, and Apple are already investing heavily into what they're calling digital credentials. About 11 months ago, Google quietly launched the Digital Credentials API to developers, which, in their own words, allows websites to selectively request verifiable information about the user through digital credentials such as a driver's license or a national identification card stored on a digital wallet. The idea is that instead of handing out your identity to hundreds of different sites individually as new laws start requiring it, you just thoroughly verify your ID with a company like Google, and then they verify you on your behalf to all these other sites. Now, before we get into issues with this system, and believe me, there are issues, it's important to understand how this is going to be sold. The benefit to you is that you only need to stand up and take a selfie holding up your license and some number of fingers once, instead of dozens of times for every site that starts requiring your ID. It also does generally cut down on the risk that your identity will be stolen through a hack because it limits how many different places are holding your actual credentials. And for what it's worth, a company like Google is more likely to keep that data secured properly over some of the more sketchy digital domains you're probably thinking of trekking into. And that's actually the point. Every data breach that makes headlines is a way to market these new services as a safer alternative. In a way, what Google is hoping to become is like a PayPal for your identity. Instead of handing out your sensitive details everywhere, you just hand it to one reputable third party. Now, the business potential of such a system, if it were to be widely adopted, is massive. The reason that these companies are generally supportive of this legislation is because they stand to more than make up the revenue from losing people under the age of 18 off their platforms and then some. It wouldn't give a company like Google anything they don't already know about you, but what it would do is allow them to serve you an ad like, "Congratulations, you're already pre-approved for this credit card or this buy now, pay later service." Web pages using the Login with Google feature could automatically remove things like credit checks or personal information entry, which stands as a barrier between you and them completing a sale. It would also make it really hard for sites offering services like gambling to not work with Google, because if people get used to using their inbuilt ID verification, they're instinctively going to go where it's offered, and be skeptical of sites that want to do things the old-fashioned way. This would make their advertising business far more lucrative in certain fields like financial services, gaming, and pharmaceuticals. It would also potentially open up a new revenue source for them, as online businesses would need to pay a fee to them for their identification services, the same way that PayPal takes a commission on transaction processing. The problem for Google and other companies trying to roll out similar services is that nobody really wants this. Another Pew Research survey found that the overwhelming majority of surveyed participants would prefer to use the internet anonymously. Now, they could slowly push people to get on board with it through a long marketing campaign and a gradual rollout, but that's going to be slow and expensive. Even if it's just out of laziness, most people aren't going to sign up for a digital credential system unless they really need to. So the best strategy for these companies is to make sure that people really need to. Tech companies have been spending millions of dollars in lobbying on these laws around the world, but they haven't been paying to fight the regulations, they've been paying to shape them. Google's own announcement of their new credential system included a reference to the European Union's eIDAS 2.0 system as proof of how essential this new tool would become. But these particular regulations are something that they themselves have been heavily involved in influencing. In other words, they are creating the need and then providing the solution. If in a week's time, when YouTube automatically detects that you may be under 18 and asks for your ID to prove otherwise, you would have already taken the first step into their new, highly lucrative ID ecosystem. Now, there are absolutely other motivations for pushing through these rules from different parties as well. Governments will have more oversight over their people's online activities, e-commerce businesses will have a smoother sales process, and I'm sure some people out there genuinely do care about the children. But to make sense of unpopular decisions, generally the best place to start looking is with who stands to make the most money. Now, this feels like it would have been a great time to segue to some kind of VPN or data broker to delete me. But instead of that, I'm just going to shamelessly plug my own channel instead. After last week's video got so much attention, we're incredibly close to 100,000 subscribers. So if you enjoy the occasional expose mixed in with lots of videos about ships and microeconomics, please consider subscribing. And go watch this video next to find out why oil containers need chaos for their business to survive.